Life is so weird. And I think one of the weirdest things is you don't know what you know until you know it, which is really obvious. I know. I just woke up. I'm working on a paper. I'm so excited to have grad school for my writing problem. But it's helped me realize that I used to really think there was something wrong with me talking so much. I was born talking a lot, okay? I couldn't control that. I don't even remember that. I just heard about it. As soon as I could talk, I wouldn't shut up. I'm sure it was very oppressive. Then I just shut up for a long time. I didn't talk for a very long time. And I'm starting to talk again. Can't shut up again. Drives me nuts. But I'm beginning to realize by talking this way and writing and all the therapy I had and all the different modalities for healing I've tried, I needed as many as possible. What really got me results was expressing. It's not therapy that's helpful. It's talking. It's not specific application of principles. It's someone listening to themselves to the point where they hear what they're saying. And I think that's one reason with the politics we're getting so stopped up and not going anywhere. Not because we're not listening to other people tell us how to think, but because we're not talking and we can't actually hear what we think. Because here's what I'll say. When you're in different spaces with different people, what comes out and your experience of what comes out changes. There's a line in the Bible that says when two minds meet, it's more powerful. And that's kind of in every, religious book somewhere or another. But I'm noticing it in coaching. You're actually playing with that. You're practicing, and you begin to realize that in one person's mental space, your access to certain information is different than in another person's mental space. So you don't just want to talk to people who think like you, because they're going to open up certain mental spaces in you. And I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of rightness because we're opening up a lot of rightness in each other because we're only talking to people that think like each other. When you can engage intelligently and peacefully and enjoyably with people who think differently than you, by getting in their energy, it actually changes you. And I know some people might get a little freaky about that. Like, I don't want to be around people who are going to change me. So it's not that it changes you physically, but energetically there's a mixing, and everywhere you go, that's going to happen. And being around people that think differently is really important, because it's not going to change what you think. It's only going to make what you think stronger, richer, have more depth. So you really know why you believe it. And it's not the sort of like, when people resort to condescending put downs or criticisms, they've run out of intelligent things to say. So in a world where debate used to be an art and communication and all of that, I would say we want to bring it back to a place where we can really hear each other. Not because we're listening to change our own opinion, but we're listening so they can hear themselves in a new way. That's amazing. And I think if we realize that when we're listening, it can be service-based, and that we can be listening in such a way to allow someone to hear themselves differently, even if they don't acknowledge it to us, because that takes a lot of safety to be like, wow, I just sounded like a real ass when I said that. You can't expect them to necessarily tell you. You can be the space for them to still hear it, and they will still think about it, and it still will affect change. And I think that's where coaching is so funny, because you think you need to say things to help people change, but it's just the listening. But that's because in their listening, as they're sharing and absorbing you, an expert in certain EQ areas, their ability to hear themselves is literally enhanced by your expertise. And so you don't have to say anything. And I wondered for so long, and here I thought it was because people judged me. I just had such an insight. I thought I made people feel judged in my space, because they'd be like, oh, well, Emily, you're going to say I should do this, or, oh, I can't believe I'm saying this in front of you. Or there's been references to me being a higher level, so people feel more pressure being around me or sharing with me. And I don't like that, but maybe it's actually not that. Maybe it's actually something unconscious that we're discussing here. So thank you for this insight. And again, I apologize for it, but this is how it happens. If I wait, I'll never get back to it, so I have to do it now. But this is perhaps the breakthrough they're having and they're referencing me is because there's an internal knowledge. Maybe it's just my energy space. Maybe because people make up I'm a no shit person, like I'm gonna give you your feedback, which really I don't, but maybe I will start. Maybe that's why they sense it. But I don't have to say anything, and they'll be like, well, Emily, I know you'll say this or you'll say that. So maybe that isn't an insult or judgment of who I am. So I can take myself out of that equation. Maybe that's in my headspace as they speak because of the idea they have of me or because of knowledge they're tapping into. They suddenly think that it's an external thing judging them, but really it's just themselves hearing themselves in a new way in my space because they're playing with a certain amount of my stuff. And my stuff can be really useful for some people. My ability to execute, explore, reflect. Some things you don't want, but there's a lot of good. And I could see why, as a practitioner, if that's what we're really doing, then I would be useful to hire. Because it's always like, well, why should someone hire me? Without having, I could see if you have to hire a coach who can't say anything, like say I'm not supposed to say anything, which really is what they're training us to do, I would be one of the most effective empty spaces to play with just because of the growth and work I've done. So when they come into my space, there's a lot of active energy. And I think over the last couple months being back in this program, that's what I'm reactivating, and it's popping and cracking. You can feel the energy. So when someone works with me, their life is going to pop and crack because they're coming to work with me. And it's going to take very little from me. This has been really useful because I'm learning more and more. See, I've been studying metaphysics and the law of attraction and spirituality for at least a decade intensely, just in my free time. Probably 2, and I was raised very religious. So really and then I went through AA and had to find God. So no matter what, it's always been playing in the background. So for at least 25, well, I accepted Jesus when I was 5, so that'd be 40 years. But 20 to 40 years, somewhere in there. And okay, so I got my whole education when I was younger was Christian. So that's like 15 years of Christian education. And then add about 20 years, I would say, of Buddhism, Taoism, like all kinds of other things. But really what I've always been attracted to is metaphysics because, see, the physical science of this world is not up for debate when it comes to what God made it. And really, if you think about it, that's how I got to this conversation. If I were a God, I wouldn't really care, since it doesn't really matter, since it's just me and I'm not a singular consciousness, it wouldn't matter that something worshiped me. What I would want most is my beings to understand how it works so they could have a good time, since this whole reality is a little bit more about having fun. And so I found that metaphysics took a sting out of a lot of this. It made it more neutral because you don't have to talk about who made it. You're just looking at what. And what I'm beginning to realize is the vibrational science of physics is really the science of reality. And really what we should be studying. It's too bad we don't study that as the driver of reality. We really study biology. But biology is really responding to physics. It's just physics. So the more and more I'm getting into this physics conversation of energy, vibration, and away from sort of the physicality, I'm beginning to realize that that's what people were talking about when they talked about mysticism. And it's not that mystical because it just is. We already know these laws. I already know that if I'm happier, things go better in my day. It's already proved to me every day in everything that I do. And if I'm a bad mood or a klutzy mood or I'm upset, things aren't going to go as well. I already know this as fact because life shows me this. But we don't study what's behind that law. It's all metaphysics and the law of attraction is. So now as I'm beginning to get that, and it's like seeping into me, right? Because before it was just heady. We've talked about this, head knowledge. And over the last year and a half, it's not head knowledge. It's becoming in me. That's very exciting because that's the only place that can change anything I see is when it's in my belief system. But now I'm getting it. Now I'm getting where these ideas in the matrix come from. Now I'm getting the ability for energy to move through different physicalities. Different avatars are really just running the physical body. You have a super consciousness managing a physical body. You have a physical body that gets confused and thinks it's a real identity. The super consciousness gets confused with that. You just have all these things happening that are really just basic confusions, but you're really just an energy operator. That's all you are here. And energy is really it's your mood. We're having a lot of problems because we can't feel. It's very basic. Once you clean up your ability to feel, you'll understand your moods. You'll be able to move through your moods and understand how to go from happy to sad faster, which we never learn. And I'm still practicing, but getting much better at after a year and a half of intense practice. And understanding why it's important to practice, why there's nothing in victimhood. See, we think externally in our society there's really something to get in being a victim because we get accolades. But when you begin to realize when it comes to your actual creation of your experience, You got to get out of that because it doesn't attract good things. It's a different motivation to get yourself out of the pity pot. Not just like, oh, I'm on the pity pot and I shouldn't be here. Oh, it's like, no, this is actually not attracting what I want and isn't effective. So how long do I want to sit here? That's a much better motivator than someone being like, get off your pity pot. Why are you feeling sorry for yourself? Like, no, this is actually about effective results for your life. And now we're back into coaching. And so I see that my understanding of metaphysics, not only, or my learning knowledge, let me say that differently. It's not metaphysics, it's not mysticism. My understanding of me being energy and my senses only making me a confined physical being and someone else also being energy. And the space between us being filled with all kinds of energy. And that I have an ability to impact and direct that energy, which we really already know, but it's more conscious, is allowing me to understand how I can be the most effective practitioner. See, most people just want to learn how and then can apply it. I've realized this everywhere I've gone. I've taken on so many teams that tell me, Emily, no other manager knew how to do my job. Why do you want to learn? And if I manage you, I know how to do your job. That's just me. And so I realize now I've always wanted to know how things work. Like I can't just jump in and work on a computer system. I need to know its guts. Like I want to know how things work. Then I can take them and apply them. And I realize that's part of my personality and mind that probably goes life to life, that probably makes me different. And that's what I get here. I didn't understand why it would pay off, but not in a lot of business scenarios, but particularly in coaching and this particular application of physics. Understanding what I'm doing is going to be key to generating super results and remember, it's super results in the client. And the tricky thing here is generating results without you doing anything, because the second a coach or anyone in your life does something for you, it doesn't feel like your own and it sucks. Let's be honest. Just be honest. It needs to belong to you. And if I'm here as a coach and I want to create value, every bit of value in a session gets to come from the client. The client gets to own and take as their own. If the client thinks I have all the value, then they're going to get dependent on me. But there is going to be something where they discover those nuggets in my space where they couldn't alone. And that's going to be that connection you build, or at least initially couldn't get there on their own. And eventually, hopefully, they just be able to call for a quick second and be like, oh, I got what I needed. I just needed you to talk to me for just a second. And just tapping into it with themselves. And I'm going to understand why. I'm going to understand there's a spiritual super consciousness they're tapping into. I'm going to understand that being with me and the work I'm doing on myself outside the session and my ability to listen and let them tap into my resources is really the work. And now I understand why it's work for me, because I don't like listening to a lot of other people. I don't like sharing my energy space. I like speaking. And so all this work I do around speaking and everything will be to create about 8 hours a day, 6 to 8 hours a day for other people who want to pay well for my mental and physical emotional space where they can reach new levels using it. And now I understand why it's so valuable. It's very valuable to me. It's priceless. And I was unwilling to see how I would get to charging a higher price, but now I get it. But see, I don't believe it has a value until I'm really there and know what I'm offering. So hence, until we had this conversation, I could not charge more. In fact, even charging like 40 or 50 seemed like a lot. When you're talking about really shifting someone, that's where you can get into bigger dollars. But it's not about that right now anyway. I'm just excited to understand how I could motivate that. So now I can feel confident as a student charging a rate of $40 or $50, where before my student rate was $25. Because I'm practicing something that really is going to create value. And I'm developing the ethical boundaries and integrity. I'm being integrated to the point where I can bring this integrity knowledge into every space and developing the boundaries to make sure I maintain that. Key points. I'm writing a paper about this right now and just wanted to hash out that point. Ended up becoming very insightful for me. I hope you got something out of this. I really appreciate you lending me your headspace so that I can have these insights, which you are 100% a part of. Thank you. And hopefully it's mutual and you had some insights as well. Be blessed.